everyone, welcome to the AI Canvas, the podcast that explores the impact of generative AI on businesses, the arts, and our everyday lives. I'm your host, David Foster, co-founder of Applied Data Science Partners and author of the book Generative Deep Learning, Teaching Machines to Paint, Write, Compose, and Play. Now, over the coming weeks, we'll be diving deep into fascinating conversations with a diverse range of thought leaders, including musicians, artists, journalists, educators, marketers, lawyers, and those at the cutting edge of this fascinating field. We'll explore their unique insights into the opportunities and potential threats of deploying this technology across industries and how it's going to reshape our world. We have a fascinating conversation ahead of us, so sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of generative AI right here on the AI Canvas. Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the AI Canvas. We're so happy this week to invite on Francisco Recalde, who is Head of Modern Foreign Languages at Dixon's Unity Academy here in the UK. I'm particularly excited to talk to Francisco because he has a particular interest as well in AI and the ability of this to actually transform his other specialist subject of education. And I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation today, Francisco, just about everything that this might do for students, for teachers, everyone involved in education, because I think there's no doubt that this will have an impact. The question is over what time frame, when, and I guess for good or for bad, perhaps in some cases. So welcome to the podcast, and pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
So perhaps if you could just start with a quick introduction to yourself, tell us a little bit about how you got into teaching, and maybe also a bit about how you got into AI.
Yes, so I am native of Paraguay, South America. So I've been here in England since 2005. I've been teaching now for 10 years, and I've been working as a head of languages at Dixon's Unity Academy in the last 3.5 years. And I have a little role in the trust I work for at Dixon's Trust. The role is called the cross-cutting champion for AI. And basically, my job is to encourage the use of AI and find use cases, and also work with the executive team. We did a couple of videos for a mini series for the trust. And yeah, that's what I do. Try to get people to use AI, basically.
Oh, amazing. And do you think then that, have you seen this technology be incorporated into what you're doing in a way that people are feeling comfortable? Or, what's your kind of, if you had to summarize how you feel people are adapting to the technology? Do you think they're adapting quickly, slowly? And maybe let's take that from the kind of teaching and learning side to begin with. Is it something you're seeing really transform ways of working?
Uh-huh. I think it's a technology that's basically in its infancy, and I think maybe we're coming off the hype cycle now. And what I found is that the response has been mixed. So we had people who know very little about it, people who are scared about it, people who are already using it. According to a recent survey by TeacherTalk, which is an app that teachers use to give responses to questions about education in school, they found, and the sample is about thousands of teachers, and they found that about 4 in 10 teachers use AI. And I still talk to people and I explain in very sort of basic terms what it is, what it does, etc., etc. There's a lot of misconception about what it is, and people have the impression that it kind of, you just put a prompt like, write me an essay about Shakespeare, and it will throw out exactly what they want. And so there's still a lot of sort of education needed on what it does and how it works, and what he's able to do, what he's not able to do. So mixed response.
Yeah. What would you say then are the best use cases of AI that you've seen so far? Where do you think, wow, that's something that's actually going to save a ton of time or add a huge amount of value to an existing process?
Well, I think the best use case of AI is in creating resources for teachers. So it's once you learn to use a couple of prompt formats and you craft a very useful prompt. So, for example, you use the RTF prompts uh, sort of format. They give it a role, a task, and what you want the output to be like. And once you have one crafted, for example, for a model text, then you don't have to create another prompt. You just use that again and again. And for the same thing, basically change a couple of things. I think that saves time. Um, that's probably the best use case in terms of model text and for example, cover work, which is the vein of a lot of people, um, sort of adapting resources for students with special educational needs. So for different groups in the class, those things are really useful, especially if you can use tools that have the ability to give it more context, like Claude, for example, where you can attach a file to Claude and use that file as the basis to your resource. That works really well. Yes. So I think that's where it is, particularly in subjects like humanities, science, languages, English is really, really useful. With maths, a mixed bag really, because large language models aren't that good at maths. They can make basic errors with maths. But with all those subjects, very useful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I think a lot of the time, what we hear is that there is almost a fear that it would take away some of the personalization that a teacher will be able to bring to a subject. And I know in so many cases that's not true, because you can actually have more time to do the things that allow you to personalize your own style of teaching and your own way in which you deliver the subject. And you're taking away time from things that you actually don't want to do because they're the monotonous bits of the job. What would you say to anyone who's maybe got that fear that they don't want to just hand over large parts of what they're doing to AI because then they feel like they're stepping away from their core responsibility? What would be your general sort of message to them?
It's very interesting. I think that what you have with AI is it's like having a research partner and explaining to your research assistant or partner exactly what you want. And once you learn how to ask those things, it will be able to give you a very good draft from which you as an expert adapt and change, and you make sure it is right. So I guess your role changes a bit, because you kind of an editor of it. And I think once you learn to use it, once you have a couple of use cases for things that you do every time. So for example, I do a little newsletter every week for my cross-cutting AI champion. I have 5 things noteworthy, and once I automatized the prompt, I don't have to write that again. I just add the links and it does it for me, and then I check and then I post. And then teachers can do the same with whatever resource they're creating or whatever output they want. They just need to find exactly what they want, find how AI can do it for them, and then edit it. At the end of the day, you are you are responsible for the output, not the AI.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's a really illuminating way of describing it with a research partner. We often say it's like having an intern or someone that you can teach, and they can work incredibly hard on something incredibly fast. It's like having the universal intern that can work 24/7 for you if you need it to. In terms of modern foreign languages, I'd be interested to hear a bit more about what your experience of it has been with this, because this is a very particular and nuanced
need, which is that it needs to talk obviously in not just English, and a lot of the text that you find on the internet is English, and maybe there's not so much in MFL subjects. So have you found it good for generating MFL content?
Well, it depends on what model we're talking about. So obviously the free version of ChatGPT is okay, is good at basic things. Still the Spanish is very accurate, very good. In terms of grammatical rules, and not necessarily in applying it, but in asking it to explain or asking it to do certain things is not as accurate. But like, we have lots of models. Definitely the best model available is excellent. ChatGPT 4 is absolutely brilliant. And again, if the problem that you find with your use of AI is accuracy, one way of making it more accurate is to give the context. So attaching a document you want it to work from, or just copying and pasting on ChatGPT, the rules or the explanation you want it to work from, and you will have a more accurate output. So yes, I think yes, for modern foreign languages, in terms of creating resources, excellent for students. I've not actually recommended. I don't actually recommend that students use ChatGPT. The issue with this technology is that it interrupts a schooling in a fundamental way. So writing is wedded with knowledge, logic, and reason. So when you write, you think. And if we too early rely too much on large language models to generate things for us, we're actually impeding thinking and progress. You kind of just learning to talk to the AI, if you like. And I don't think that's recommended, at least when they're very young, and when they're still thinking, and they're still because to get good at something, you have to make mistakes. You have to you make mistakes, you learn from your errors, and then you get good at it. And you need to allow that to happen. And I think that's where ChatGPT is, large language models are an issue in school.
It's a really good point. We're sort of heading into the unknown a bit, aren't we? Because the technology's out there. It's not behind any sort of age filter, or it's just available to whoever wants to use it. So if someone logging on aged 10 years old could use it just as well as somebody who's going through university. And so I wonder if it's sort of similar, I guess, to the idea of a calculator, that you wouldn't just give someone who's learning what a number is and how to add 3 and 2 a calculator and say, well, you tap it into this thing and it tells you the answer, and that's all you need to know. As long as you got the right answer, that's the math, that's what's important. And it feels like it's the same thing that we're going through now, but for the very process of writing. It's not the right answer that's the important thing. It's the process you've gone through to get that essay. That's where the learning takes place. Doesn't take place at the end. It takes place through. So I wonder if there's what needs to be done, do you think, to help students understand that? Because I think it's an education piece on the risks of AI too early, right? That seems to need to be done.
Yes, I think there is some education needed. I think there is we need to tell students what this technology is. What are the do's and don'ts? How they can use it to help them learn, and when their use is actually an impediment to their learning. The thing is really difficult to expect. It depends on the student, but very difficult to expect that most students would follow your advice and would actually use it sensibly. And if you have the tool to do the homework for you, to would you not use it? And instead of doing your homework, just go and play on the PlayStation. So that, I think, is an issue. The other thing that you mentioned about AI being like a calculator is that you actually need knowledge in long-term memory to be able to to express yourself. And if you just look at, or if you just think that you can go to AI and ask it to give you the answers, it's not really your knowledge. It's not in your head, and so it's not really as useful. And so they just go to school so they can gain knowledge, so they can be functional citizens and be able to actually not just get a good job and all that, but actually enjoy knowledge for knowledge itself.
Yeah, the learning process is
Yes.
fun. If you love the subject, then you get a real kick out of it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, it sort of takes me back to the days when before ChatGPT, or even before, the internet, when I was at school. When I remember a time when I had an essay to write about, I think it was 1066, Battle of Hastings. The lead up to it, all of the different players, the consequences, and so on. And I remember going to my dad saying, I don't understand what I'm doing here. Like, this is all, I don't get it. Like, I remember him spending a lot of time with me, just sitting down, helping me to understand, and almost like bringing it out as a story, and then explaining it and talking to me about it, helping me to structure what the essay might look like as, well, what do we want to talk about next. And then I went away, I wrote the essay, and I remember getting a good mark for it and thinking how much I benefited from that early conversation. And I just wonder how we get to a world where every student was as lucky as I was there, and can have, even if they don't have parent and guardian that could sit down and help them with that sort of thinking, that there is a mechanism through which AI can. And in no circumstance there did that essay get written for me, but I was allowed to structure my own thinking in conversation with somebody who did understand how to write that essay really well. So it's a really interesting analogy between talking to an AI and just talking to someone, your sibling, who might be able to help you. And that, I don't think any teacher would say, well, you can't talk to your brother who's done this subject 3 years before you, or your sister. Of course they would, if you're helping the learning process. So I wonder how we can get to that point where AI is seen in the same way.
But you raise a very interesting topic, and I don't know much about philosophy of education, but just to give you a little background. So in the UK, teachers are kind of in two camps. So there are the traditionalist teachers, and who believe that you are not you are the sage on the stage rather than the guide on the side, and you have authority in the classroom. You tell children what to do, and they follow your instructions. And then there are other teachers and other schools where they use more a discovery learning type approach, where you kind of draw the learning out of the children. And they have two different purposes. So the traditionalists would say that the aim of education is to have whole-rounded citizens, that there is objective truth, and that it is important to attain that truth through knowledge. And on the other side, we have people who believe in self-fulfillment, and the aim of learning is sort of to find yourself and to find what you want to do in life, etc., etc. And I think those two views of education and the purpose of education do kind of give you an idea of what people might think AI will bring to education. And over the last 10 years or so in the UK, we move on towards a model that is sort of more research informed. We work towards a profession that wants more empirical data before moving on to do something, rather than shooting from the hip and doing, maybe this works, or maybe this works with my class, so let's try these. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. And in terms of what people think AI might bring, basically, some people think AI will bring a future where, like you described, you have kind of AI as your friend to guide you, and what is usually missed in these conversations and in these debates is the context, like where. So it's important to know where would this work. So in a school where children are sensible, well behaved, they can exercise, they're disciplined, and they can kind of do that for themselves. Probably a discovery learning type approach would work for them, because they will go on and they'll take the learning on their stride and go for it. But in other schools where children struggled a bit more with discipline and with following instructions, and they cultivated or they make decisions that are not good for themselves, then that approach is much harder. You have to kind of be more strict, and you have to kind of tell them what to do.
For sure.
And so it really depends. But what I see is a future where AI will definitely be embedded more and more in sort of in education. And what I'm really interested in is in the development of adaptive systems. So computer programs that when you are on it and you answer a question on, let's say, on multiplication, it tells you that, you got it wrong. And so they'll give you an easier question because you got that wrong, or that you will have to go through another series of explanations before you move on. And it kind of adapts to what you know, because in school, teacher will tell you that the most important thing is what the student knows. So what is the prior knowledge? I can't teach you Spanish. I can just go, lesson 1, hello. If you already speak Spanish very well, I have to adapt to what you know. And I think adaptive systems are the way to go. That would be ideal. But I don't see that we have many of those yet, because it takes a lot of time to prepare. And I think there are examples in India and in other countries where they use MindSpark for literacy and numeracy. And those things are really good, especially if the option is using MindSpark or not teacher. And also, I was reading, there's a professor at UCL called Professor Becky Allen. She's very influential in education, and she writes, she has a blog, and she wrote recently about that there is research comparing the least effective teacher of math and a computer software, and who would allow students to make more progress, and the computer software does. And I think where AI is very interesting is in filling that gap. So right now, for example, there is a teacher and a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. So, for example, in 9 years since 2015, the government only reached once their target for recruitment. And so what we have in schools, and particularly in schools where my trust works in the north, we have, problems trying to find teachers to come and work with us. It's hard, it's tough. And so sometimes we'll have classes where, they have the cover teachers, and they have a less than ideal, lessons, if you like. It would be amazing if they could have maybe an hour of in front of a adaptive system, in front of a software that allows them to learn faster than what they would if they were in front of the coaches.
Yeah.
And that's where AI is really interesting. That's where I think that the impact is. Educators and you know, and technology working together to find out solutions like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like you could almost break it down into two steps. One is, how much does this technology want to get the student to learn in the first place versus a teacher? And how much then, when they're in the zone of learning, is knowledge transferred? Because you're right. You mentioned earlier that the first step of this is getting students in the right mind frame at all to learn anything, because you have to actively learn. You can't sort of passively just sort of let it wash over you and hope that something goes in. You have to sit down and think, right, I'm going to learn this thing now, and I need to engage my head and work things through. And I think that's not the same thing though as once that student is in the mode of learning, how much do they learn as a result of using the tool? So, and I think this is where there might be a difference between AI and teachers, because I think that, I've certainly remember the great teachers from when I was younger. They made you want to learn in the first place. And I think that's such an important step that often gets missed in the conversation is, sure, AI might be great once you're in the zone of learning, but how do you get that AI to get the student to want to learn in the first place? And then it comes down to user experience, UI design, feedback, adaptive learning, making sure that the questions aren't too hard, aren't too easy, so that you feel like you're just on the cusp of what you are good at all the time. So I really, that resonated really with me when you said all of those things there, because I think that matches really well with the way I've been thinking about it as well. I just wanted to ask you as well about examinations, because this is another area where I think it's going to impact enormously, because I think it comes down to, what do we mean by performance? What does it mean to be good at a subject anymore? Because it used to be that we could take an essay and use it as a proxy for intelligence, because that essay, the quality of the essay was correlated with the amount the student knew. And I suppose that's breaking that down slightly now, because we have the ability to create very, very good essays with zero understanding. And how do we differentiate from a student that has taken the time and maybe writes a slightly worse essay, but just has a higher level of understanding without the AI? And an exam, is a perfect example of a situation where we're meant to be controlling conditions, and we're trying to move away from the idea that students have to sit in an exam hall, but maybe that needs to come back because of these new systems. I'd just be really interested to hear what you have to say about exams and performance and measuring attainment.
Well, you want assessments to be reliable. So you want to know that what you are assessing, you're assessing fairly, and you're able to get the data that you want. And and then you want to make valid inferences from the assessment. So if you want to know how much I know of Shakespeare, you want to create the conditions on which I can actually reliably give you the knowledge I have. And we can safely say that any piece of homework or any assessment or anything, any writing that a student can do at home is not reliable, because you have no way of knowing whether AI wrote it for them or helped them, how it helped them. You have no idea. So unfortunately, I think writing homework is necessary, but is not reliable to assess students' progress. And so if you really want a reliable way of assessing the writing skills and the knowledge, it probably needs to be under controlled conditions in a classroom. And that's where, again, I think we need to try and reimagine what it would be like a school with these adaptive systems. That I hope they're not too far away, to be honest, because AI is such a good technology not to use a verb word like this.
Yeah.
And I think, so if you have a supervised study time where you assess the student's writing, or a supervised study time where you teach students how to use AI, then it's more likely that you yield better results and allow students to learn how to use AI better. Tell them how important it is that they learn to write on their own. Because imagine, you need, basically, it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong here, you tell me more about it than I do, but it seems like with coding, which I know very little about, but it seems like the language is getting easier and easier to, in the 80s and the 90s, the coding language was harder.
Yeah.
And now it's getting easier. And it seems like there are efforts to make coding much easier and just use simple English. And so the better your English, the better your language, the better you'll be at coding, the better you'll be using the AI, the better you'll be at anything, really. I mean, it's foundational. And so really for me, personally, and I think a lot of teachers would agree with me, you have to keep AI away from the children as much as possible in terms of just allowing them to use it freely. I think you need some sort of control over it.
Yeah, and behind tools where it's designed for use by children. So if, like we've talked about there, the idea that, there might be adaptive systems in future that are using AI behind the scenes, but that the student doesn't just have complete free reign over what they're typing into the system. The system is being locked down to their curriculum, their subject.
Yeah.
And it's there as a guide and as an assistant, as a research assistant for them, more than it is just a body for hire. Somebody who's there to just write their essay for them, or
you need a version of ChatGPT that would tell the kids when they ask them, "Can you write these for me?" And they said, "No, you're not allowed to ask me that." You know how I open AI? There are 7 questions. He won't answer. He helped me to make a bomb. He won't do it.
Exactly.
But obviously, so you need something like that.
And I think that's well within reach. That feels like something that's achievable. It's not sure. I mean, it's every system like this, I think, will have its teething periods, but I think in the long run, there's no reason why we can't build that. I mean, we've done the hard part. So
it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
And what worries me a little bit is having read a little bit about it and having experienced it a little bit, is like the technologists and educationalists are in a way divorced. When I give an example. So early 2000s, the government had a policy of having an interactive whiteboard in every classroom, and it cost billions of pounds. And for teachers, it was basically a glorified projector.
Yeah.
And
the slides up on.
And there is no evidence that made any improvement to educational outcomes. The other example I give you, iPads. So in America, the state of California signed a contract with Pearson and Apple, and it cost them $1 billion. And halfway the project, they wanted a refund because they didn't, the software that Pearson produced wasn't good enough. The kids that were jailbreaking the iPads. And here in England, I started teaching in 2013, and I remember iPads being the thing. There was something called App Smash. And basically, you would go to Twitter or to websites where teachers would show you how they use the apps for formative assessment, for all sorts of things. And, in many ways, at times, it was harder you spend more time learning to use these apps than actually learning how to teach or learning how to. Things were not sort of, there was not joint thinking, what would be actually helpful, in what ways would these help, in what ways would they hinder, and hopefully we will have a collaboration where we do have big companies, because you need big companies to produce really quality resources. You need a lot of data, and so hopefully that will happen, and I have hope that it will. It's just such a good opportunity to let it pass, but hopefully we can. That greed doesn't get in the way of producing something that can actually improve outcomes.
Agreed. I think it's such an elegant idea to be introducing into the classroom. The elegance of just being able to say, the bottleneck to most students' learning is that there's just a barrier between the subject matter and their own current level of understanding. There's such a chasm that to get from where they are now to this level of understanding they need to be, you have to build that bridge somehow. And building the bridge there is something I think that AI is very, very good at. I think it has the capability to understand where a student is, where they need to be, and not just to, like a textbook, blindly just tell them, just keep repeating what they need to be, and it's without any consideration or concern for where they are at the moment, just like a good teacher would do. A good teacher wouldn't just say, well, you've got to understand trigonometry and here's the equation again. They would say, well, let's break it down. Where are we at the moment? What are we able to do? And then break it into those kind of micro steps that allow them to build the knowledge up. So I think that AI's got, you're right, it got the potential to be that companion, but in a controlled and constructive, manner that isn't just about saying to students, you can now use ChatGPT. Because that's just the Wild West.
That is the Wild West, indeed. I mean, there's tools already that are trying to do what you described. The Canamigo. So I read a blog about how generalized is the feedback Canamigo gives. And basically the blog was criticizing Canamigo for giving very generalized feedback. And I understand where the criticism comes from, because a teacher would actually personalize the feedback better. But what we don't see that is the first iteration. That's the first thing that they're doing. That is likely that's going to get better. And yes, I think these tools can definitely exist, and I think the efforts of, for example, the Oak National Academy has a AI tool based on their curriculum, locked to that curriculum, that allows you to create quiz questions, a quiz, multiple choice quiz or single word answer quiz, etc. And it's not brilliant, but again, it's the first time they're trying it, and I think these things will slowly get better. People tend to, I think is it the Amara law or the Amara principle? It says that people tend to overestimate the short-term impact of a technology, but underestimate the long-term impact.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And we ChatGPT 3, I think it was launched in November 22. We are in March 2024. It's been a bit more than a year. It's still baby steps.
Yeah, exactly. Where are we going to be in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we touched on earlier is, when do students get introduced to this kind of technology? I wonder as well if it's worth talking as well about the idea that a lot of students will never know a world without it, and that they'll be growing up surrounded by the idea that you can talk to a machine, and what the psychological impact is on people. We've never had this before. We've never had this ability. In the same way that I suppose you could say, well, the internet was the same thing. We've never had the ability to know anything immediately, and now we did. What's the psychological impact? And we've obviously seen the detrimental effect of things like social media and constant news coverage and constant information feeds. And being able to not get your data back once it's on the internet and social media. You can't unpost it. It's viral. There's things like this. So I wonder if there'll be other impacts on students and just all of us that we'll need to be very wary of if we're using AI regularly. And it's particularly, I'm sort of thinking more about those who've never known a world without it, because that must be quite a shock to our poor old evolved brains who are expecting to go out and hunt and start fires and things, and now we're being told that we can talk to the block of metal in front of us. We'll talk to our fridge one day and that'll have ChatGPT integration, or in the classroom, I guess. I'm just thinking, will we get to the point where students think, what's the point of me? Why do I come into school every day when I can just talk to my AI assistant? It's just as good. I'm learning. I'm just thinking bigger picture here, and whether you feel that there's a risk of the whole setup of education coming into question.
We live in a world where more and more we value self-fulfillment. So what we want for ourselves, our careers are kind of geared towards what makes me happy. And our education system is, in a way, based on archaic values. It's not necessarily on self-fulfillment. It's on achieving truth of,
objectively,
objective truth, acquiring knowledge for knowledge itself. And I think AI in many ways undermines the role of schools and the role of education, because how long would you be willing to put up with going to school when you can stay at home and you can learn anything you want? You can do anything you want now. If you have the will and if you have the motivation, you can learn anything you want. And for how long can we sustain this educational system as it is? If we do have the resources, I think that's going to be hard, especially if you have a narrow curriculum. If your school is dedicated entirely to very sort of academic subjects, or whatever, why would you want to go to school? That is going to have some impact on schools, and already after the pandemic we've seen that I think schools struggle with attendance. So attendance is low nationally, and I think we sort of inadvertently undermine attendance by telling people stay at home. I'm going to school, and now we say no, I'm going to school. And people may be working from home, and having their children with them have had to use technology, and have realized, I'm actually as a dad or as a mom, maybe they've seen, they can watch a YouTube video and learn what they would have learned at school, or something of the sort. And imagine that 10 times more intense in the future when you have an adaptive system or something like that available to you. And in fact, now you do have, you go to Coursera and you learn digital marketing or whatever you want to learn. yeah,
Yeah.
that's be the psychological impact. But the psychological impact will be on motivation. You know, and of course, schools will always be not just places for learning, but we, as a society, we also treat them as places for childcare,
Yeah.
and
True.
kids need to socialize and do
Mm.
other things. And we understand that. But in terms of learning itself and the classroom itself, yes. And hopefully, as a language teacher, I think that AI has a tremendous potential, because I do think that in my subject in particular, a blended approach is possibly, you know,
Mm.
recommendable. So, for example, um, if you have 2 hours of Spanish a week, on the third hour you spend on the computer lab,
Mm-hmm.
we know that to learn languages, what the most important thing is the input, how much you are listening to the language. And, you know, AI uses the opportunity to, listen and interact with it, talk to it, and that you can't have, 1 to 30 ratio.
Yeah.
Obviously you can't do that. So yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and it feels like this utopia that we sort of dream of. It's not a direct linear path from where we are, gradually getting better and better and better until we reach it. I think the way I'm sort of seeing this is that there's going to be a really tricky period where we have to drag the education that we have today out of the old Victorian objective truth view of what education should be to almost it might need to get more challenging before it gets better, because there's going to be a huge amount of disruption to exams, to the way in which students perceive the point of coming to school. They don't come to school maybe to sit in a classroom as much, but they come to do pastoral things, or do longer term projects with across a range of subjects all at the same time, that don't just involve one at a time, but are more sort of challenge or investigatory in their approach. I think, yeah, I mean, some countries are exploring this, I think, more than others, aren't they? I know we always talk about Scandinavia as being quite a forward-thinking set of countries in this regard. But then also, there's still extremely high academic levels of achievement coming out of the likes of China, India, and so on the league tables, certainly. So, and they take a very different approach to what education is, and of course, they still have just the same technologies we have. So it's cultural as much as anything, isn't it? I think it's about what's going to be accepted by students in any country.
Yes, I think what I would like to push back a little bit in terms of the Victorian arcade, is that you still need facts. You still need to know facts. You still need to know. You still to have knowledge. If you don't have knowledge, you can't think. So facts is what you think with. So you do need to know all the things that seem boring. So if you don't know your multiplication tables, you can't do equations, you can't do maths essentially. And the same, you don't know letters, you can't read. So you need to know all these. So the archaic model that I was referring to was these one teacher,
Exactly.
30 students.
Yeah.
And we kind of wed it to a timetable, and there is no slack in the system. So, you have the person that does a timetable in school has to work out which teacher teaches what class and when. And sometimes, because of the way the timetable works, he can't pair the correct teacher with the correct class. And so if you were to have a couple of labs in the school and have certain times where kids would access that lab, that would give you some slack into your timetable, and you'll be able to pair teachers with classes better, and still have in subjects where blended learning is recommended, you'll be able to have, that, and that will be ideal. And in other subjects where you need the expert teacher there, then you do that. That's where I think the technology is interesting, and especially at the moment, where we need teachers. We don't have teachers.
Yeah, definitely. I hear what you're saying. I think that's right. It feels very achievable. Like it doesn't feel like maybe if you'd have asked 3 years ago that we've got all of this incredible adaptive technology that can talk back to you in your language and understand where you are and where you're going, but I think this breakthrough with generative AI, particularly, that we're nowhere near the end of. Like you say, we're 1.5 years into this journey. Feels like the breakthrough that's needed, and it needs a lot of people who are listening on both sides of the education technology divide to each other as to what's possible and what needs to be possible, to listen to each other and build something amazing. But I hope we can get there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to end just with one final question, which we always ask everybody who comes on as a guest, which is, what's your prediction for the future in your field? So what do you think education might look like in
you want me to be an LLM and predict?
Yes, as a large language model? I want you to tell me what you think. Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. I heard somewhere that if you want to know what the future would look like, you need to see what is the sort of repeated behavior. And unfortunately, our behavior hasn't been great with technology and education. But it's just such a good opportunity to miss it. What you could build with AI could really make a difference to education, could transform education. And I'm not just saying that as in like ChatGPT style, that uses hyperbolic language, transformative and game changer or anything like that. I'm saying it generally. I think it does have that potential. But I pray it does end up in good hands and good people make good decisions, because it is an incredible tool.
Yeah, well said. And to avoid this becoming the next, I guess, interactive whiteboards in every classroom, we need to make sure that there's people listening to what students and teachers need, because that's, I guess, the key to unlocking the real potential. Francisco, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us again, and wish you all the very best in your endeavors with AI and everything you're doing at Dixon's.
Thank you for having me.